All right, and we're going to continue with our work on Unit 1 here. And today what we're doing is we're going to shift gears just a little bit. And we've been talking about point lines and planes. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about angles. And so this is going to kind of be our intro to angles. And you can see that we're moving into standard 3 here. So we have standard 3.1, I can identify and name angles. Standard 3.2, I can classify angles based on their measurements. And standard 3.3, I can find the measure of angles using my knowledge that the sum of the parts of an angle will always equal the whole. All right, so here's what I want you to do for the opener. If you look in your notes, all right, you should have a sheet, and I've already started cutting them up here, but it should say Geometry Unit 1, Lesson 4, Opener Angle Sort, and you can see that I've already started like cutting up the angles right here, okay? And so they are all numbered, all right? So if you don't have scissors or if you don't want to cut them out, that's fine. You can just reference the angles, but here's what I want you to do, is looking at all the different types of angles here, and you have 36 types of angles on your angle sort here, is what I want you to do is try to create different groups for your angles, all right, and give a reason why you put all those angles in that particular group. Now, there's not a wrong answer to this. This is just to get you thinking, all right, so what are some commonalities that we can come up with to group things, all right? And then I want you to have at least 2 different groups, all right? And so I notice I've given you room to create 5 if you would like to create 5 groups, all right? All right, so what I was saying was that, sorry, I had to pause for the, they made an announcement, but anyhow, so I want you to create at least 2 different groups, maybe 3 or 4 if you want to go that far, and then just write your description, right? So maybe angle 1, 8, 9, and then write the reason for why you group those. All right, so go ahead and pause the video, do that, flip back on, and I'll show you what I came up with. All right, so when I look at my card sort, all right, I had like 122 in a group. I had 160 in a group. I had this one, which was 58 degrees in a group. I had 150 in that group. I had another 50 in that group, an 80 in that group, a 40 in that group, a 100 in this group, right? So you can see that there's 2 groups for me, another 60 and an 80. And then I had this angle right here, or whichever way you want to kind of look at it there. All right, and that's a 90-degree angle, all right, and then I had another 90-degree angle, and then I had these 2 angles, all right, so that's how, those are my 4 groups. Now, why did I group them here, all right, and this really goes back to, all right, some basic terminology that maybe you're familiar with, all right, types of angles. So these are all right angles, which means they're equal to 90. All my angles here in this second group are between 0 and 90, and we call those acute angles. And notice, these are just lines, but they're also an angle. We call that a straight angle because it's equal to 180 degrees. And then all of my angles over here on the right side, all right, are obtuse angles. So they're between 90 and 180 degrees. Now, you may have come up with, all right, some completely different groups, and that's totally fine. And we're actually going to discuss those, and I'll ask for some of you to give me some of your groups when we come into class tomorrow, all right, and we look at these, all right? But this was just want you to kind of see if you remember some of that terminology and to go through that with your angle sort. Now, try to hold on to these, all right, because we will come back to these in our next unit when we talk about other kinds of angles, all right? So you might just want to kind of stash those, all right, in your folder at home somewhere. All right, so let's go down to, all right, some of those terms that I just mentioned here at the bottom. All right, so an acute angle. All right, so what is an acute angle? So let's write that in right here. So an acute angle is an angle, all right, whose measure is between 0 degrees and 90 degrees. All right, and then we can write that as an inequality. So we could say 0 is less than the measure of angle A, all right, is less than 90 degrees, right? So it's between 0 and 90. It's not equal to 0 because then we won't have an angle. And it's not equal to 90 because if it's equal to 90, that's our next term here, a right angle. So a right angle is an angle whose measure is equal to 90 degrees. All right, now once again, if I'm going too fast, you need to write this down, pause the video, write it down. Remember that you do have to have all your notes fully completed, right? And then turn it back on and go to the next thing. So if I'm moving too fast and you need more write time, all right, be sure to pause that video. So the measure of angle A is equal to 90 degrees. All right, and then that's where, once again, we see this symbol. So to make sure you're familiar, that's our right angle symbol. And you typically will see that. You won't necessarily see it written as 90 degrees. You're typically going to see this. All right, so if we don't see that, so even if I see this, All right, it looks perpendicular. It looks like it's 90-degree angle, but if it doesn't have the marking, I can't assume it. All right, so it could be 89 degrees or 88 degrees or maybe 91 degrees if it's tilted just a little bit. So we only assume it's a right angle if we have this right angle marking. All right, so now an obtuse angle is an angle whose measure is between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. Put my periods on there, try to have a little bit of, all right, good punctuation there. And so once again, so that if I write this as an inequality, so 90 degrees is less than the measure of our angle is less than 180 degrees. So once again, it's not equal to 90 and it's not equal to 180, but somewhere in between. So 90.58, that would be an obtuse angle. And then finally, our straight angle, right? All right, is an angle whose measure is 180 degrees, right? And that's a straight line. All right, so just a straight line. And we're not going to try to fool you. So if it looks like a straight line, all right, in our pictures, you can assume it's a straight line, all right? Okay, even though I was a little shaky here, right? That was supposed to be, all right, a straight line. Okay, so now that we kind of have these basic terms to kind of group our angles and to talk about our angles, let's talk about naming angles and the notation that goes with that. All right, so when we look at notation for an angle, all right, there's 3 different ways to name an angle. All right, some of these work all the time, some of these work some of the time. So you have to know the difference here. So the first thing is when I look at my angle here, A, B, C. B is what we call the vertex. That is where the 2 rays, all right, connect. So that's the starting point of both rays. So we have 2 rays that make an angle. All right, so we have ray BA, okay, and if we think back to our ray notation, we have ray BA and we have ray BC. So an angle is formed from 2 rays, all right, that have the same starting point, all right? And then when we look at this, we can name an angle using just the vertex. So I can say angle B, and we can have the little angle symbol like that, all right, and then angle B, all right? Sometimes we might have a number in that angle. So notice there's a 1 here. So I could say, oh, this is angle 1. Okay. Now, sometimes I have to use 3 points. And so what we do is we use 1 point on one ray, we use the vertex, and then we use the point on the second ray. Now, the key is when you use 3 points, the vertex always has to be the middle. So I could say angle ABC, or I could say angle CBA. Those mean the same thing. All right. So ABC, CBA. Notice in both the vertex. All right, so ABC, there's my angle. All right, and then CBA is my angle here. So notice if I didn't have B in the middle, it wouldn't make sense because if I did BCA, BCA would be that angle, right? Okay, so it should make sense if I read the letters, I should trace that angle. So A, B, C. Now, notice there's only one angle B here that we're talking about, which is why I can use the vertex and only the vertex. But now let's slide down here and look at our picture down here. And so sometimes we have a more complex picture, which means we have to be more specific with how we name our angle. All right, so for example, if I said, hey, let's look at angle M. Well, here's M right here. When I say angle M, well, am I talking about this angle? Am I talking about this angle? This angle? This angle, right? So there's too many angles with the same vertex. So notice when I go back to my picture here, there's only one angle B, it's ABC. I know exactly what we're talking about. So if I have multiple angles, right, sharing the same vertex, I have to do one of 2 things. I either have to use 3 points, okay? So let's say that I'm talking about this angle right here at the top here. So then I have to name this angle with 3 points. So I would say, oh, if I want that angle, instead of saying angle M, right, I would say I want angle WMY. And so WMY. All right, so like I was saying, let me just move the camera a little bit here. All right, we have WMY, which is that, all right, angle there. Once again, you could have used the other direction, right? So I could have said angle YM, W like that, same angle. Now, here's the other thing you can do. You can always add a number to a picture to reference it. So notice there are no numbers in this. So I could have said, oh, I'm going to label this as angle 2. all right? And then when I say angle 2, I know it's specifically that angle, right? So you either have to use 3 letters or you have to add a number. So for example, if I want to talk about this angle down here, I could make that angle 1. I could say, oh, there's angle 1. We all know what you're talking about. We can see angle 1 right here. We know it's this specific angle. If you use 3 letters, right, I would have to go VOX, right? Angle VOX or angle XOV, like that. All right. Now, the last piece of our notation that we're going to talk about is how do we write the notation for the measure of an angle? All right, now there's a lot of pieces here. So one is we put the little m that says measure. We have our angle symbol, and I'm just going to use a number here. So the measure of angle, whatever the angle name is, and then we put the degree, so 81 degrees, like that. So you have to have the measure, the angle symbol, whatever angle you're talking about, as an equal sign, and we put the 81 degrees on there because there are other ways of measuring an angle, which you'll learn next year in Algebra 2. All right, so we're going to be specific, right? So measure of angle ABC is equal to 131 degrees. So we want measure, the angle, equal sign, and then the number with the degree symbol. All right, so that's all of our intro to angle work. All right, make sure your notes are filled out completely, and we will continue this lesson in class next time. See ya.